Good morning and welcome to our baking demonstration today. My name is Ann Howard Hill with Meridian Community College Culinary Arts. Today we are going to be making 3 types of pie crust. One is a basic crumb crust with graham crackers. We are going to make a basic pie dough and a sweet tart dough. Okay, we are going to start with our basic crumb crust today. I've got a 9-inch pie pan here that I'm going to go ahead and spray with our baking spray. This has flour already incorporated into the pan spray, and I'm doing a generous coating all along the edge as well as the base. So my pan is prepped and ready. I'm going to be taking graham crackers and placing them into a food processor here, just breaking them in half, kind of crumbling them up. And when I run my food processor, I'm not just going to let it run straight by itself. I'm going to pulse it so those graham crackers get nice and broken up into fine pieces without becoming mushy. All the little goodness out of there. And we click on our top and we're just going to pulse. And as I'm doing this, I'm looking to see that the graham cracker is folding on top of itself and all becoming crushed up into little particles. Sometimes if that doesn't happen, you can remove the lid and take your rubber spatula and move it around a bit to get some of the larger pieces more towards the bottom and the smaller up towards the top so you can get a nice even crumb. Okay, that looks really great. We are in good shape. So I'm going to remove the whole container, set this to the side over here, and I'm going to take off the top, get a bowl, and gently remove the blade, set it aside, and I have this nice mealy crumb of graham cracker here. I'm going to go ahead and pour that into my bowl and get all the little bits and pieces out of it. And here I have some melted butter. I'm going to drizzle that on top, but I love to kick it up a notch by adding a little bit of cinnamon flavor to this. And you got to have some sugar because we're going to be putting sweet filling in, so we want our crust to have a sweet flavor. So I'm going to dump my granulated sugar in as well as my cinnamon. I'm going to mix that together here with my rubber spatula just to get it evenly combined. And then I'm going to drizzle my melted butter over the top to make it all come together and stick together to form our crust. And as I pour it, I like to kind of drizzle it over completely the whole top area so it's not just in one big clump. It makes it easier to incorporate into the crust. And we have great tools in the kitchen. Modern advancements and technology have made things very easy, but there is nothing better than your God-given tools, which are your hands. So in just a second after I get this good and combined, I'm going to place on a pair of gloves and use my hands to clump it together into a nice tight mixture. And obviously if you did not have gloves at home and you wanted to use your bare hands, that would be fine, as long as you properly wash them beforehand. So I'm taking the crust and kind of squeezing it together to make sure that all of the butter is evenly incorporated. And this here makes about 3 crumb crust, and we're only going to do 1 today. So what you want to start out by doing is scooping a little bit into your hands and into the center of the pan. And then you're going to take the heel of your hand and press it from the center out towards the edge until you have a nice even layer on the bottom. And you want to pack it in there nice and tight so that when it bakes and you cut it, it holds together instead of falling apart into bits and pieces. And you want to make sure that your bottom layer is nice and even, not too thick, about 1/8 of an inch. And now I'm beginning to press it up around the edges. So from here, as you can see, I have a nice even bottom layer. I'm going to get a little bit more and I'm going to sprinkle it around the outer edges of the crumb crust so that I can come up on the edge of my pie pan. Okay. And we are just pressing it up against the edge all the way to the lip. Like so. Still making sure the bottom stays nice and tight and that there are no holes or gaps. And you can always go back in and add more of the crumb mixture if you don't quite have enough. And we are going to add a little bit more to the bottom because as I'm pressing out up into the sides, it's pulling away a bit at the bottom. And then when you're finished, you're going to take your finger and go around the rim of the pie pan so that you have a nice, smooth, even crumb crust. And from here, you would bake this, then add your filling. And most of the time for something like a key lime pie or a lemon icebox pie, you bake the shell separately, put your filling in, and then let it set up in your refrigerator for 12 to 6 hours or sometimes even overnight, and then add your topping. So this is a basic graham cracker crust. I'm going to give a quick wipe here, and we are going to move into our sweet tart dough. So what's really important with sweet tart dough is the first step is creaming your butter and sugar together. Today we're using powdered sugar as well as unsalted butter, but that unsalted butter is softened. We've had it sitting out at room temp for quite some time, so those things easily mix and cream together. We're using a mixer here, and we are using it fitted with a paddle attachment, which is the best attachment to use for creaming. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my butter, put it in the bottom of my mixing bowl here, and I'm going to go ahead and add in my powdered sugar. Okay, and if you've ever worked with powdered sugar before, it will fluff up if you turn your mixer on way too quickly. So you want to start out nice and low so that you don't end up with a face full of powdered sugar. And we're going to let that cream for a second. And here we have our all-purpose flour and baking powder that we have already sifted together to completely combine and incorporate, as well as make nice and smooth without any lumps. The next step after our butter and our sugar cream together is we are going to add our egg component for moisture and for texture, and we're going to add them one at a time until they're completely incorporated, and then we will add our flour mixture to that. Now that the butter and the sugar have incorporated pretty well, I'm going to cut up that speed just to quicken the process here. And while that's happening, I'm going to ask one of my students to walk around the camera and go into the walk-in and hand me the pie doughs as well as the cube butter for our next recipe. Okay, when you're doing this, it's important to use your spatula to scrape down the sides and bottom of the bowl as well as the mixing attachment so that everything is completely incorporated and nothing's left sticking to the sides or the bottom of the mixer bowl. Thank you. Great. One reason I've already pre-prepared some dough is because it has to chill for 30 minutes to an hour before you can actually work with it and roll it out and place it in the pan. So I already have that prepared here, which I'm going to set to the side. This is nice and creamed. I'm going to show you guys what this looks like. You're looking for a light, pale yellow, fluffy mixture. Gotta click that back in and reattach our paddle. Okay, and now we are going to add in our eggs one at a time. Turn it on low, and I'm just going to gently crack an egg into the bowl, pour it in, and you always want to crack it over something else besides the bowl you're actually mixing in to avoid any breakage or shell getting into the mixture. You want to fully incorporate each egg one at a time and then add your flour mixture. I'm going to go ahead and crack this other egg. Now that that's fully incorporated, I'm going to go ahead and add the second egg. Turn up my speed slightly. I'm going to take a moment to scrape the sides and the bottom again, just to make sure I'm incorporating every little bit of ingredient. Nothing's left on the side and bottom or the paddle attachment unmixed. There we go. Now that that's fully incorporated, I'm going to turn my speed back down to low and gradually add in my sugar and baking powder mixture. I'm sorry, flour and baking powder mixture. Sugar's already in there with our butter. Letting that completely incorporate. I'm going to add in our kosher salt, as well as a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And cut it up just a little. Okay, and I'm going to show you guys in just a moment, but you will be able to see how the dough is all coming together in one solid mixture. It is a sticky, tacky dough, so don't be deterred by that. I'm going to put on a pair of gloves. And you could do this, you could roll the dough out onto a floured work surface or board, but for today, since I'm going to be doing another recipe, I'm going to be rolling it out on this sheet pan. But it's very important that we flour the surface lightly so that our dough does not stick to it. And I'm just going to use my hands. As you can see, the dough has all come together, to pull it off of the paddle attachment. And down into the bowl. Where I will just use my hands to scrape it all out. And onto our sheet pan here, and you want to make sure to get every little bit of dough. And I'm going to press it into a nice disc so that when I wrap it and put it in my walk-in or refrigerator to chill, it's easy to roll out into a pie or tart shape once it's done chilling. And we're going to set that right over here for now. What we do have is we have some already prepared sweet tart dough. When you guys make a tart, you're going to put it in a tart pan, which is different from a pie pan or a springform pan. The bottom actually lifts up, but you have the edge around so that as you bake and add filling, while it cools, it can set up and it will hold its shape. And then once it's finished, you just lift it directly out of the tart pan. Again, like the pie pan earlier, you want to spray it really, really well, including the edges and the bottom. We are going to flour our work surface here. And we are going to unwrap and roll out our sweet tart dough. This is obviously more than I need for just one thing of tart dough or one tart. So I'm going to cut this in half using my baker's knife. I'll set this to the side here, sprinkling a little bit more flour on the top as well as on my rolling pin so that it doesn't stick. And you kind of got to get it started by pressing firmly to roll it out into a disc. This has been sitting in the fridge overnight, so it's nice and firm. Just put some elbow grease into it. Flip it over and continue working that dough. And the goal is to have it in a nice disc shape. But if it's not perfect, no big deal. And as you can see, some of the pieces are beginning to pull apart. That's okay. You can just take your hand and gently press them together, almost like Play-Doh, and create a solid surface. And then continue rolling out the dough as you need it. And if little pieces pull off, that's fine, because we're going to combine all the scraps at the end anyway to get another piece of dough. And so what you can do from here is gently lift this up, and we're going to begin to press it into our pie pan. But I want you guys to notice something right here. So when you roll it out in the real culinary kitchen and in the real world, nothing makes a perfect circle, and that is okay. So I want you to take your hands around the edge and press it in like so until it meets the corners. And then from here, you are going to take your rolling pin and just gently roll it against the edge to where it cuts off that remaining dough. And we have all these nice little pieces of scrap that we're going to begin to place into the bottom of our pie shell or our tart dough shell. And what I'm doing is I'm pressing it with my fingers so that it makes a nice, even surface where I've connected all the parts that were broken. And I'm using the heel of my hand because it helps me get a more even layer in the tart dough versus my fingertips, which make little fingertips. And I have that, and I'm going to do the same thing again, rolling over the edge. To create our tart dough shell. You can blind bake this previous to actually putting your filling in. Today in our lab, we're going to be making a lemon curd tartlet where we will pre-bake the dough in the oven, then add our lemon curd and put it in the walk-in to set up. That is sweet tart dough. I'm going to do a little cleanup right here, and then I'm going to show you guys how to make basic pie dough by hand. We have mixers and all sorts of wonderful things in the kitchen, but if you don't have a mixer at home, you can easily do this with a few basic kitchen tools. Now that we're clean, we are going to get a big bowl, okay, and a sifter of some sort. You might have a crank flour sifter at home. This we call a drum sieve or a tamis, and it serves the same purpose, and you put that directly into your bowl. I already have my flour here. I'm going to dump it directly on top of the tamis or sifter. Then I'm going to add in my salt. Some recipes call for you to add the salt at the beginning or after you've cut the butter in. I like to go ahead and sift the flour and the salt together, and you do so just by raking it with this baker's knife or bitch scraper into the bowl. And this gets out any little lumps and clumps. You can also shake it like so. And then dump any little extra piece that you have in there. And we'll set this to the side. From here, we are going to cut in our butter. When you are making a basic pie dough, you have cold unsalted butter. You go ahead and put it in or cut it into small little cubes, which help it easily work into the flour mixture. I'm going to place some gloves on because I am going to use my hands for a few things with this. And this is 1 pound of cubed butter, and I'm just evenly sprinkling it on top. And I'm going to use a pastry cutter. If you do not have a pastry cutter at home, you can use a large fork. And we are literally pressing the butter or cutting the butter into the flour mixture against the edge of the bowl. I'm using the bowl to create some friction between the cutter, the flour, and the butter. And this is never going to be completely mixed in. You're going to end up with tiny little pea-sized granules of flour and butter mixture. And sometimes it sticks to the cutter, so you just take your fingers and press it back down into the bowl and get all that butter back in there so we can continue incorporating it into the flour. Takes a little bit of arm work. And by cutting the cold butter into the flour, you end up with a flaky crust, or what we like to call a mealy pie dough. And again, I'm going to scrape that butter off the cutter so that it continues to incorporate into even smaller pieces. This pie dough can be used for savory products. It can be used for sweet products. We will use this today for a rustic root vegetable galette as well as a chocolate cream pie. Almost where we want to be, just a little bit smaller, making sure that all the big chunks of butter are broken down. Okay, so now we have this nice crumbly texture of flour and cold butter, as you can see. And what we're gonna do from here is go ahead and add in a little bit of granulated sugar, because we're using this one for our chocolate pie. We are going to add in a tablespoon of vanilla extract, and we are going to add in some fresh buttermilk. You want to be careful not to add too much liquid when you're doing this, and I'm just going to take my hands and begin to incorporate it. You can use a whisk, but the clumps are going to get caught in a whisk, and to me the best method is with your hands so that you can squeeze the dough together and fully incorporate it all into one mixture. I also like to use my hands because the heat from your hands helps soften that butter slightly, which helps the dough mixture to stick together. And you see how it's beginning to stick, but it's kind of mealy or falling apart. That's exactly what you're looking for. So many people get to this point and think, oh my goodness, I need to add more liquid, but you don't. So I'm going to begin to press this together into a nice tight ball. And I'm only going to press out what I need and reserve the rest for another pie crust. And as you press it together, you end up with a nice round of mealy pie dough, which you would also wrap and refrigerate until you're ready to use, which I already have pre-made for us over here. And again, this has been in the walk-in overnight, so it's nice and hard, very chilled. We're going to make sure we sprinkle some flour on our surface here so that the dough does not stick. Also, we're going to flour our rolling pin as well as the top of the dough. And we're going to get to work, starting in the center and working our way down. Get my arm workout for the day. Whoop. I'm going to go ahead and cut this in half so it's a little bit easier to work with. Set this to the side. There we go. The great thing about pie dough is it freezes very, very well, and it will keep for a couple of months, and then you are going to spread it out over your pie pan and blind bake just like you would a tart dough shell. And again, this can be used for sweet or savory applications. Thank you so much for joining us for our demo today, and we hope to see you next time.